Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day two. We have the CEO Roundtable today, and it's my privilege to introduce the panelists. I have with me Mr. Felicia Phillips. He's the chairman for Phillips Consulting. Mr. Ike Chioke, CEO of Afri Invest. Mrs. Sadia Aminu, CEO of Urban Shelters, and Ms. Dupe Olushola, who is the CEO of Transcorp. Today's roundtable discussion will focus on fragility to our agility. We are primarily going to be talking about the hospitality industry, the aviation industry, food and beverage industry, real estate and construction industry, and really essentially talk about some of the challenges that Nigerian private sector players are facing, what they need to do post-COVID, given the challenges that we've been through. Most of these organizations are coming out of a recession. And post the recession, we've been hit with a COVID crisis. Today we say we're living in a VUCA world, a world that is really the environment where everything is around volatility, there's so much uncertainty, there's complexity and ambiguity around all industries. So all organizations are going to have to pivot and understand new ways of operating, how to really grow and thrive given the new normal that we are currently operating in. And it's really my privilege to have this conversation with the esteemed guests around what organizations need to do. So first of all, let me invite Mr. Felicia Phillips. Mr. Phillips, I would like you to give us your perspectives on what you believe are some of the challenges that these industries that I've mentioned were facing pre-COVID. So for example, we know the aviation industry was going through quite a number of challenges. It'd be very good to get your perspectives on where these industries were pre-COVID, and then we can start to drill down a little bit more around what they should be doing post-COVID.
Okay, thanks, Linda, and good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and we had a great first day yesterday. It was very interesting, and I expect that we're going to have even more interesting discussions today. When you think about where we all were about, say, early this year, I think this year one started with a very, very high sense of, look, let's go for it. Let's try and see how we can make things work. We were all just dealing with the impact of the oil glut, the impact of the fall in oil prices, the challenge of Forex revenues falling significantly. And it was a case of where we've been before, but slightly aggravated because things were really not going well in our favor globally from the oil point of view, which is a great dependency of ours. And when you look at it, we started the year with a positive note to deal with the challenges that we all could see. And this is for all sectors, for the whole economy in different ways. But I think what was more, what really shook everybody was when COVID struck and it changed everything totally. And it put everybody into a real tailspin. It's totally unexpected, a global challenge, and things that started to happen was just unimaginable for the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry, aviation. I mean, 1 minute you're up and running, the next thing you're down, and I think it shook everybody in a very, very drastic way. And during that time, we conducted a lot of surveys at Phillips Consulting. We were trying to find out exactly how organizations were dealing with this in different ways. And I know that you talked about construction, entertainment, hospitality, aviation, but I'll tell you that whilst they were hit extra hard, for the generality of the business world, globally and certainly locally, it was a bit of a shock, because don't forget, these industries, we all don't work in isolation. We all highly integrated. We were part of a whole value chain. And what happens in aviation affects hospitality. If you stop flying, you're not going to need to stay in hotels. And if all of a sudden you don't have to go to your office anymore, you begin to challenge why you need offices. So these are the things that were sort of creeping up on us very, very quickly. Let me just share very, very quickly with you some highlights of the survey results that we did. Quite a lot of them. First of all, at the time, this survey was done around about August or so. We found that about 55% of businesses were operating at 50% of their capacity at that time, if not less. And 57% of the CEOs of the 100 CEOs we talked to said they didn't expect, or they don't expect any recovery till sometime in August 2021. And even then we begin to see, we're not quite sure how things will pan out. The pandemic itself has had a very positive effect on IT in most organizations because they've had to really step up on the ability to survive in a world that had become very, very digital and very, very IT driven. While it had a huge negative impact on everybody's financials, well, maybe not the banks, okay? And certainly staff engagement as well was being challenged. Staff were very worried, very concerned. Some were having to go with less money. Some, the jobs were stopped. And so, across all industries, employees were challenged, and therefore the whole value chain of ability to buy, ability to purchase, ability to participate was being challenged as well. And then a lot of organizations, their business strategy was just confused. I could imagine what the likes of Transport had to deal with, and what the different airlines had to deal with, and what estate agents had to deal with. Everything just sort of changed, and it was a case of let's get back to the drawing board. What are we going to need to do? How are we going to survive? What are the things that we're going to have to start doing and things we have to change? 46% of companies straight away started, they cut their compensation. About 15% of the CEOs we talked to said they didn't require the kind of office space they were using before. They wanted smaller office spaces. 68% said they reduced travel, they reduced tours, they reduced all these conferences and meetings and just flying, even for marketing purposes and so on. About nearly 70% of them said, look, we just cut these things off, and staff allowances were cut, staff salaries were cut, rental costs were reduced, staff training, for example, the knee-jerk reaction was to stop training staff. And yet we know that these are all the components and ingredients that literally make organizations to function and keep us all occupied. And only 6% of these organizations said they were really prepared for this in terms of issues like business continuity and responsiveness to the kind of things that are going on around us. So my response is more of this general impact that was taking place. And therefore, we find a situation where people are now dealing with remote working. People are having different models of how you work from home. People are now saying that even the airlines that are trying to get back on their feet, they're saying if people won't fly, maybe we can try and ship goods and services. The hospitality industry, some are beginning to say, look, let's go back to the beginning and ask, what exactly are we supposed to be doing? Let us redefine the essence of what customers want from us. And don't forget also that the fundamental thing that we all face with, people didn't want to touch each other. People moved away from each other, and this fear of COVID. So when you take the fact that social interaction and therefore business interaction was halted on an economy that was already struggling, I think that for all of us, it was a major wake-up call. And I'm sure going forward, we will to have various discussions in this area. So whilst I do recognize that construction, real estate, entertainment, hospitality, aviation, were all hit very hard because of the abruptness of the way they had to start business, it was something that affected everybody generally because of the systemic impact of that situation. Okay. I don't, Linda, I think am I frozen or so? I think I'm frozen with Linda.
No, we can hear you, sir.
Have we lost Linda?
I think we might have lost her.
Yeah.
So, Felicia, you're going to be the moderator.
But we can hear you.
Yes.
But we can hear you.
Mr. Phillips just painted a really.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can
Yes.
hear you. We can hear you.
Is that Linda? Well,
Mr.
I mean,
Phillips, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Well, maybe until Linda joins us, as Ike said, maybe Ike, since you've spoken, maybe I don't know what Linda was going to ask you, but certainly let's assume that we're starting off by having a general view of where we are today, where we've been, and the realities we all face today. You know.
Thank you for that, Felicia. I think the challenge for businesses in 2020 is that many have yet to recover from the recession of 2016. And you can imagine the injuries caused by 2016. And here we are limping along at sort of 1.5–2% GDP growth and coming into 2020 with a lot of expectations. At the time, I recall at the beginning of the year, we were all sort of looking at the television about there's this cruise ship stuck in Japan with COVID, and it sounded like something very far away from Nigeria, very far away from our world. And every other day, you sort of sit down on CNN and just watch this thing unfold and how these people were not allowed to come off the ship. And suddenly by March, we were being told to lock down. It was a major shock to the system. And as that was happening, you then had a consequential breakdown in the sort of global supply chain system as a result of COVID. And this is unprecedented. I mean, it has never happened in most people's living memory. And the last time we had any pandemic of this sort of scale was about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you that indeed a lot of businesses have been impacted and affected. But if you then focus on the specific sectors that have been most affected, the fragile ones like aviation, hospitality, the manufacturing sector, particularly the FMCG space, and of course, real estate and construction. These are areas I think some, to some extent, have been more digitally focused because of the structure of their business. They've had interconnections. But you can imagine a real estate company based, doing residential real estate in Lekki may not be bothered with too much systems and processes and computer systems to manage their affairs. Of course, an airline would have sufficient systems, but and that's a more disruptive one when you announce that you can't fly anywhere. And of course, your customers may want to go somewhere, but they're not allowed to travel. So that's, is a complete shutdown of your business. Where we go from here, and I think behind every crisis, there's an opportunity for growth. I do believe that given what we have experienced from COVID, that we can look in selective sectors and find ways to rebuild from within. And that then begins to show the resilience that can come out of each sector. Let me take something like hospitality, for example. I have not traveled outside Nigeria for the last 10 months. And, previously I would have thought that would have been an impossibility. But here I am longing and wishing that there were resorts in Nigeria that I could visit to, because I'd have no desire whatsoever to go to the United States or to Europe and get stuck with their COVID problem. But I wish I could fly away to some beautiful resort. They may be in Cross River State or even in the Kainji Dam. I heard the dam is beautiful, a lovely lake overlooking it. Or just down the road in Ekpe from my house. But it's just that we haven't really invested enough in the local tourism opportunity to get us to travel and enjoy what nature has given to us or what we could create for ourselves in Nigeria.
Linda's back.
I'm back, yes.
Linda's
yes,
back.
I'm back.
So Linda, sorry, I was sort of standing in for you, and you can see Ike was sort of given an introductory perspective, and he's diving straight into, I don't think he wanted to start diving into solutions yet. So
No.
maybe I'll pass back to you and say, all I've done is give him my introductory statements. Ike has done his and is moving ahead. Maybe, Dupe and Sadia would like to say a few
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. So, Ike, may I suggest let's hold off on the solutions yet in terms of what to do, because we'll come to that. I would like Dupe. Now, Dupe, you have been in the trenches in the hospitality industry. It would be great to hear from your perspective, pre-COVID and during COVID. What were the specific things that you did as an organization, and what did you see in your industry to survive? What did you do to survive? You had lots of employees, some of them could not come to work, your hotels were shut down. How did you survive, and what has it been? How marginally different was it operating during COVID and pre-COVID?
Thank you very much, Linda. And I must actually, first of all, start by commending the Nigerian Economic Summit Group for this relevant topic at this time. Fragility to agility is definitely an important topic that needs to be discussed even more than ever. Obviously, with the onset of COVID, it has affected, all industries, regardless of, what sector it is, ranging from manufacturing, as we've said, to real estate, to aviation, and regardless really of the size of your business. So from medium scale to SMEs, and as a nation that is reliant almost completely on oil, it now shows us, in fact, how much more fragile we are, and the impact of COVID has worsened this and further aggravated our own fragility as a nation. More than anything, this is now time for us to even look at diversifying the economy and to drive productivity, address our own fiscal policies as a nation, our debt issues, expand our revenue generation, creation, focus on poverty creation, and of course, create jobs. And, take advantage of this disruption to ensure that we're able to define our economy across all the sectors. In 2008, 2009, being in the banking sector, when the subprime happened, countries took advantage to leapfrog into a sustainable business environment. So we should also look at using this opportunity to be able to, and I think it's an opportunity to actually grow strong and change the trajectory of the country. Speaking personally, as a CEO of a hospitality business, let me share my own personal story. So I was announced as the MD CEO and took over in February this year. So really right at the onset of the COVID pandemic, exactly. At the beginning, I think we made the announcement in February, my announcement immediately taking over in March. From the onset, I think in February, we were doing about numbers of occupancy of about over 75%. Like Ike said, we went into January, into the new year, very hopeful and very optimistic, a different role with a lot of excitement. But right on, the first thing, once I took over, we began to see cancellation of events. We saw lockdown almost immediately, resulted in government restrictions on social gathering, early departure of guests, literally went down from over 75% to as low as 5% occupancy in the months of March and April. We saw a drastic drop in our revenue. We started reporting losses as high as 52% in the months of March and 92% in April. So imagine this, having to take over at a time like this. In February, we're doing almost 70% occupancy, like I said, and we're down to 5%. This in the history of the hotel, 30 years history, we've never seen anything quite as bad as this. So immediately, one of the key things we did was, for us, our strategy was very important. The first thing we did was go back to the table and actually review our strategy to say, what is the business continuity and sustainability plans we had to put in place. So very quickly, we're looking at decisions of, do we actually shut down completely? We have a few long stay guests in the hotel. So we made a decision to say, no, we would actually leave the hotel open. But one of the key things we had to do was put in place a protocol to ensure sustainability, put in place, for us, nimbleness, the speed, the responsiveness and dynamism was so critical in making decisions. So as a company, we actually implemented very, very few strategies. One, our crisis management to stop the bleeding. So we immediately engage with all of our stakeholders. So range from the government to negotiate to see how we're able to actually get some concessions with our vendors to ensure that we're able to stop the bleeding immediately and reduce our cost. We're doing things like, actually immediately putting our protocol in place, ensuring that we could cut down on our energy costs, negotiate significantly with our vendors. So with my team, we reviewed and made decisions to remain open. However, we had to embark on those cost initiatives. Renegotiation of contracts, like I said, we suspended all our further commitments to acquire assets immediately over that period of time. And we had to actually communicate with all of our guests and stakeholders, ensure that we restored confidence to them so they could come back to the hotel within this time frame. But more critically, one of the things that we had to do was actually to look at reintroducing initiatives at the time that ensured that we could gain top of mind awareness with our guests. We introduced different initiatives. So we knew that people had been stuck at home for months on end, and introduced initiatives like actually our outdoor catering services. So we, we're doing fast food takeaway delivery services. We had drive-in cinema at the time, and also laundry services. These were things that normally you wouldn't have thought about a hospitality business or hotel doing. But at the time, we had to just make sure that we were proactive, and we came up with initiatives that could actually engage our own customers and our guests at the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very insightful. And I'd like to come back a little bit later to talk a little bit more about what are the plans going forward. But please hold. I'd like to talk about that a little later. Let me invite Mrs. Aminu. Can you share your perspective on the construction industry as well, similar to all the other panelists?
Thanks very much, Linda. I think, it goes without saying the real estate and construction industry have been some of the hardest hit. Again, I don't wish what happened to Madame Dupé. Congratulations, by the way, what a year to take over. But I completely agree with all the panelists, and Mr. Phillips really outlined what is, because it's not something that's in the past. We're still living in a very stark, I think, economy to be in. Likewise, Mr. Chioke, to say that for most companies, most businesses, in particular real estate, again, 2016 really had already set that scene for a very difficult recession, which really we'd only just kind of coming out of that towards 2019. And certainly in January, a lot of exuberance, personally as well as a company, we had our employee awards in January, and the management, were all on stage saying, this is our year. And clearly it's not going to be our year, which is fine. But I think, so, the figures are not great. You're looking at, 0.1% in terms of what we're contributing to the economy. You're looking at a shrinkage of between 20 to 30% for both real estate and construction. So then it begs the question where, how do we begin to come out of this? I know you don't want to talk about that strategy now, but what's happening as well is you've got this knock-on effect. There's demand side and there's supply side when it comes to construction and supply side. You're looking at everything from finance to materials. You're looking at skills and capacity. You're looking at what's happening at the port. Are they working? On a good day, it's the port anyway. With a 4-month closure, what does that mean for whether it's things like demurrage? What I love about real estate and construction is because of the integration of it, the kind of value chain is everything from that lady that sets up our little mama put, at the front of the project, and so she's for the next 2 years, to the lawyers, to the estate agents, to actual laborers, and all through. So it has such a huge negative impact when that industry is down. And Dupe alluded to 2008. That's why even though the subprime market was what was tanking, there was a huge stimulus towards real estate, because that's clearly what would kind of kickstart the economy. I hate to use that term, but we are in a new normal where we have to kind of rethink and relook at how we work, the way we work, what we prioritize. Like you said, there would have been a time when, whether it's studying, whether it's training, you would go across all the way to Brazil, take your Estaco 2 weeks, fly business class, have a wonderful time in Acapulco, and then head back. What does that imply for future? Yes, there are gains and there are losses, though, significantly. What would financing be like? You know, personally, Urban Shelter, we were poised, just to give you in terms of background for what we do, what I do in terms of business-wise, we are a real estate development company. And we have the project conceptualization, project management, construction, handover marketing as well. We are on 12 sites across Nigeria, 2 in Lagos, 6 in Abuja, 2 in Kaduna, 2 in Niger State. We are constructing at the moment across 80 hectares of land. On an average year, we normally produce 500 to 600 units. This year, it'll be more like 200-300 units. Some of what I call our key 4 people, you know, these are staff, contractors, suppliers, our financial partners, and of course, stakeholder clients that keep us alive and keep us, you know, plugging. So once this hit in March, it really was a case of across the board for those stakeholders to say, what is our clear communication strategy? Being transparent, being honest. This project will be late. There's no denying it. You call up everybody individually. You sit down and you renegotiate contracts with your contractors or with your suppliers. You rediscuss terms with your financial partners. You put a difficult call into your clients, say, sorry, that dream home might be a month late. But what I realized with Nigerians actually is that maybe we don't get it a lot, but we appreciate that honesty, as difficult as it is, because it allows us to plan. I think where as a company as well, Urban Shelter was fortunate is I came on board 2015. So I caught that first recession. We were just coming out of it. I think in a number of ways, it helped to position us to deal with some of the shocks that we're now facing today. For instance, oil pricing collapsing, the forex instability, inflation rising, and cost of inputs rising and kind of getting out of hand. Of course, nothing prepares you for a pandemic. And I think that's also okay, because that's part of this agility, that's part of that resilience, that's part of that discipline to roll with the punches. And that's something I inherently love about the Nigerian spirit. As hard as it is, we will wake up the next morning, the sun will rise, we will overcome this. And despite, what I would call, understandably, a knee-jerk reaction, I think, by the Nigerian government, closing everything down, despite what the figures were showing us compared to, for instance, the Western world, again, understandable. But it obviously was such a huge shock to the economy. And then kind of getting some of these, I think, strategies in terms of how citizens can cope, that obviously, again, perhaps was not pushed far enough. What made it, I think, a real humanitarian crisis for us in the real estate industry is, everybody was told to stay at home. Yeah. For 60-70% of Nigerians, we were not going to provide at home. We were told to wash our hands and keep clean when people didn't have pipe-borne water. With a closer look at how we address it going forward. And I'm fortunate enough to sit as the thematic lead on the NESG, Housing and Urban Development, as well as for the Ministry of Finance, MTEF as well. So it's nice to begin to look at those strategies so that you better position the next time. So we mentioned words like opportunities here. And yes, what it does is you get this learning to say, well, we've been through this now. How do we come through it later on? Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I like the spirit of looking forward with more positivity and looking at new opportunities. So on that note, Mr. Phillips, I would like you to share your perspectives. Coming out of a crisis are multiple opportunities for different sectors. So let's take the food and beverage industry. Overnight, at least from my experience, I realized a lot of these companies had to adopt e-commerce very quickly to remain relevant. If you look at the food and beverage industry, what are some of the opportunities that you believe that industry has? And companies operating in the food and beverage industry must leverage those opportunities to leapfrog their businesses into growth. What are some of the key areas that we should be looking at?
I think, funny enough, the food and beverage industry seem to be in what we can't do without. Okay, yeah. We all have to eat, and when yesterday at one of the sessions we talked extensively about food security and the agro-processing aspect of that. What is clear is that depending on which part of society you're dealing with, the youthful part and the more dynamic and modern part of the food chain is saying that we're setting up very, very efficient systems for ordering and getting at food. Yes, I can, during the pandemic, a lot of people were able, in order to relieve the pressure of the guys providing the food, were able to sort of order your food online and have it delivered. And more of that aspect of the value chain is being done well because of our young people. They're smart and they're dynamic and they're doing all these things. But the point is, when you go down the whole value chain, and we can talk a bit more about the value chain, the point is, at the end of that line, is there somebody available and willing to provide you with the food that you need, and be able to store it, process it, transport it, and get it to the destination and get it to where we need it to be. If you look at the much more larger organizations like your Dangote, your flour mills, these are huge organizations, and thank God for them because they continue to drive the system. We talk a lot about SMEs getting up and getting people to participate in the agro-allied value chain. But don't forget, it's these huge corporations that have the distributive power across the whole country. They're the ones that are creating the demand for these products and these services and things from the farm and things to be delivered, things to be packaged and things to be shipped. They're the ones facilitating that such that everybody else can participate in that process and be a part of it. So I think that for the food and beverage industry, there really isn't a choice. We have to pay a lot more attention to it, and we have to realize that the encouragement we're giving people to get into the food production chain, I won't even say agro-allied, just that food production chain, is something that a lot of attention is being paid to. We tell people to look at the different aspects, and the general consensus or reaction we have from the younger folks, if I can use that term, is that I don't want to go to the farm and have a hoe and plow and begin to dig the ground. But the point is, you don't have to worry about that because the people who do that, they do exist. But you have to create the demand and say that, look, keep planting your yams and your cassavas and your spinach and your lettuce, keep planting them because we can make sure that we can get it to the market. And therefore we will participate in that process of ensuring that, look, we can store, we can transport, we can distribute, we can merchandise, we can get these things onto the shelf. And that's where we all come in as participating in that. And the more efficient that whole chain of activity is, the more we have a reliable source of demand from the farmers such that they can say that we can confidently do this. So I'm just going to say for now that for the food industry, what we need to do is to realize that it's a privileged one in the sense that we all have to eat, but the challenge is how can we make it a lot more efficient? How can we get more people to participate in it? How can we make this whole concept that agro is the way to go for the whole country? How can we make it a reality? And I think it's just participating and getting people to appreciate the role they can play in the different steps that exist for now.
Just a quick follow-on question. So during the lockdown, obviously it created lots of opportunities for Nigerians because supply chains were not efficient. We couldn't import, for those who import a lot of what we eat. In terms of investment opportunities within the food and beverage industry, where would you say that people should start thinking about putting more investments to grow their industry, make it more secure, and ensure food security for Nigeria?
I think definitely storage. We've got to try and find a way whereby we can store our foods. Yesterday, if you listen to what Dr. Salami said, he passed a comment about post-harvest losses, whereby our farmers just don't have the ability and capacity to store their foods and store their produce. So if I have a bumper harvest of tomatoes, what do I do if I don't have some tomato processing plant whereby I can can these things, I can make puree out of them and things of that nature? So the first thing is, how can we ensure that the farmer can keep on producing? And even when we have the dry season, we have the storage system, we have the inventory of goods, we have the food security stockpile, so to speak, to keep these things stored up. So the investment should go into that storage of food, storage of produce, and then also facilitating the distribution so that these things can go to different parts of the country and you can continue to increase the demand because of the spread. But certainly storage, okay? Storage, facilitation of the protection and preservation of food, and that's got to be the key area. People will always demand to eat. The demand will always be there, but how do we ensure that that demand is consistent and is there from one season to another?
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. So let me ask Mr. Ike. You understand Nigeria. You understand what investors want. They're looking for return on investment. So we've talked across multiple industries. Specifically, if you are advising investors in terms of how to approach investment in Nigeria, given the economic dynamics, given the landscape and the opportunities in the market, what would you advise investors do in Nigeria? And on the reverse side, how would you advise private sector players across these industries to pivot and position their organizations to be attractive to investors? Mr. Ike, we can't hear you. Just hold on. Okay, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. So thank you for that question. It is a tough one because from an investment banking point of view, there are two groups of investors. There are people who want to play in the financial markets. Yeah, and here we're talking about the real sector. And in the real sector and dealing with very fragile sectors like these ones we talked about, you know, the hospitality industry, the aviation industry, the FMCG sector, real estate and construction. You need, therefore, for the players in that sector to really begin to think how to borrow your word, pivot from the challenges that COVID-19 has created for them. But this, I think, the situation we are facing is actually also an opportunity. If I were to invite investors to look at the aviation sector in Nigeria, for example, I would then have to say, here you have a country, 200 million people with very basic and actually challenging road infrastructure, and for the most part, a non-existent rail infrastructure. But we've concentrated most of our energy in the aviation sector on just connecting the three main cities, Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. I think Nigeria ought to consider growing the aviation sector similar to the way the Kenyans have done, where instead of having airlines buying Boeing 737s to fly 130 people from Lagos to Abuja, you get them to do smaller planes, propeller planes that carry only 15, 20 people that can fly you from Akure to Ogbomosho, and just quickly hop across the country quite more efficiently, because there's an urgent need for people and services to move around. But I can see that our roads have not really caught up with the population growth. And of course, the maintenance of that creates, horrible scenarios, bottlenecks, and sadly, accidents, so which is a recurring decimal. So there are opportunities that we can move more people more efficiently if we actually adopted a different model for the aviation industry, just like getting a plane that can hop from one city to the other that are just 100 kilometers apart or 50 kilometers apart. They don't need to be 500 kilometers apart to make it justifiable, because these planes are very well built, quite rugged, and designed to do very short hops. And that can create quite a bit more revenue support. But if you're going to then focus still on the jet engines, then obviously that's a higher cost of running the business. But to do that, you'd have to hope that the authorities would understand that the regulatory framework to get that sort of business model to work needs to be different. You can't be charging the very high fan fees, landing charges for each aircraft landing that we are currently charging. We need to really be much more nimble and try and get more planes on the air and get more people moving around. Similar thing, perhaps, if you think about the real estate and construction sector. And there's an interesting opportunity for us. Yes, I know it's not an industry that lends itself to sort of digital structures. Sadia, I don't want to get too much into your business, but I know a lot of construction companies that don't even have any computer in their office, except the MD's laptop or iPad, you know. So, but if I think about where we are today as a country, and with the trillions that our central bank has told us is available as intervention funds, I could actually turn the logic upside down and say, can't we get the construction companies to come in as a group, perhaps together with some state governments, and say to the CBN, you ought to bring some of these intervention funds and put them and give us 10-year mortgages at single-digit interest rates, because that's the funding we need. Now, if Sadia has money to build and the buyers have money to be able to buy the homes, particularly it's important to have buyers have the liquidity to purchase the homes at a cost that they can afford. Imagine if I could give mortgages, between 5 to 10 million naira per civil servant for 10 years at 5%, because interest rates are so low. It means that these homes can become more available, more affordable for people to pay. And suddenly you have, people like Urban Shelter building more homes, hundreds of thousands of units across the country. But when you build one home, there's a huge supplier, a huge knock-on effect. You talk about the woman selling food to the laborers on the side. There's also the lawyer at the back. There's the real estate agent. And then there's the plumber, there's the electrician, there's the carpenter. There are people that have come back to sell you refrigerators, air conditioners, all the kitchen appliances. There's a huge opportunity to actually restart the economy just from the housing sector. Now, obviously, I haven't really thought through how we fix the office real estate problem, because since COVID started, I've learned quite well to work, from home or work from anywhere that I have internet connection, and that is a debate that we can have at another time. Let me stop here at this point and just with those two examples for aviation sector and the real estate sector.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mrs. Dukwe, let me invite you to maybe share your views on where the hospitality business is going to have to position itself. Obviously, it will be the industries that are innovative and agile going forward, and are preparing and doing multiple scenario planning for if similar crisis that could happen. So for you as a group, how are you positioning yourself, and how are you working across the value chain within your industry to make sure that should a crisis like COVID arise again, you're ready, you've shored up your resources, your supply chains are not disrupted, your employees are able to be productive even in a crisis. So what are you doing to be agile and innovative and sustain your business?
Thank you very much, Linda. So globally, the numbers for recovery are not set to actually happen until 2024. Those are the indications we've seen globally. However, for us, I think it's important to say that Nigeria is actually a resilient country. And so that has really been very helpful as well. So post-lockdown, our strategy as a business was, very key to focus on our recovery plans, to recoup our losses and get our key business metrics to level aligned with our business objectives. So way forward for us, having stemmed the bleeding, one of the key things that we have done is to really focus on efficiency in our business, continuous sweating of our existing assets through operational efficiencies, relationship management, stakeholder management at all times is really critical to us. And introducing new initiatives. So I mentioned about, the death of local tourism. And for us, this is one of the key things that we're looking at. So we're bringing in a lot of promotions to actually continue to push domestic and local tourism, so that people start to look at our resorts and look at the hotels that we have as an alternative to actually traveling and going abroad. There's so many things, like in Abuja, there's the Impempe rocks, where people can actually have an experience. So we're very keen to bring traffic to the hotel and actually share experiences and promotional engagement for them as well. So initiatives that we're focused on are some of our asset light strategies, to introduce service lines and new initiatives. One of the things that we're looking at is a business called Aura, which I think we'll talk more to the market about, but it's an asset light strategy. Critical going forward also is, how do you deliver on an enhanced customer experience? And that is really important, because customers have now become, more, they're more, the options that are available to them are limited, but they're also more proactive in making the choices that are available to them. So we're ensuring that in terms of customer experience, it's so critical in terms of what we deliver to them. For us, key critical takeaways that are really important in actually ensuring sustainability is, one, your people. And internal stakeholders, it's so critical. So working with my team, we're constantly challenging ourselves to say, what are the new initiatives that can be introduced in what we see as the new normal? So business has changed as we see it, and people returning to the hospitality and hotel industry has changed. So we're constantly challenging ourselves and bringing in new experiences that are critical to ensure that we can do this. The next thing that is also really important, the single most critical force actually to help move from fragility to agility, is really about your customers, understanding what the customer requires. Every experience that you sell to the customer is important. So it's more, people are more important now more than ever. And for us, that is one of the key things going forward. One of the things that I would also like to say, really for us, the fierce agenda, which is, as leaders and as teams, it is so important that one remains flexible within this time frame, flexible and free of fear. There's an intentionality that is also required in ensuring that we're able to give more to the business, and that is one of the things that actually ensures that you remain agile. Emotional intelligence is also critical to ensuring success, and it is one of the things that has also kept us in and staying long as well. So resilience, which I mentioned earlier on, is so critical to actually encourage customers to come back to the business. And initiative, collaboration and creativity in this time is also important. And engaging with all your key stakeholders, ensuring that they know what is happening, keeping them along, communicating with them, execution in all of the initiatives that we bring in, and of course, excellence delivery at all times. So we're continuing to bring initiatives, like I mentioned, the Aura. We're looking at things like, quick service food. We're looking at different initiatives, even like the shared office space mentality as well. So it's no longer business as usual. It's about introducing and moving and being dynamic in actually offering customers exactly what they want, and continuing to improve and deliver to the leisure market and deliver to the domestic market, so that people see that there's an alternative to going outside of Nigeria within the for tourism and for relaxation. Thank you.
Thanks. Before I move on to Mrs. Aminu, I want to tap into two comments you made. You talked about understanding the customers and delivering what the customers want. How are you doing that? And then secondly, I just want you to briefly touch on how you're going to restructure your people. So there's a lot of talk around future of work. It's a very sort of dynamic, innovative idea in terms of how you manage your people and get the best out of them. So for a hospitality business, the two areas you talked about, providing very top-end customer service and better managing your people for productivity. How are you doing this before I move on to Mrs. Anu?
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of what customers want, we believe that customers want a superior experience. And it is no more about just the material things. It is actually about the experience. It is meeting them at their needs. And so we are constantly on the pulse. We are engaging with our customers on different platforms and ensuring that, you know, we get customer feedback. We're constantly in their faces, engaging to know what they want. And so this is important. There's actually a channel for feedback, which we also ensure that we deliver on that as well. And, you know, it's like I said, customers have become more, choosier. What's the word now? Are more, you know, in terms of their options. Selective. Thank you very much. It's not more just about, you know, saying this is what you're going to have, but it's about giving them the options, giving them the choices, and that is very important to us. It's about really understanding what customers need and you know, targeting it specifically to each customer and not believing that there's just one hat fits all for all customers. So that is really, really important to us, and it is really about feeling the pulse and ensuring that we meet those needs. In terms of employees, so for us at Transco, actually, we had over 1,600 employees. Obviously, with the pandemic, with the onset of the pandemic and the level of business that we had, it was not practical to keep all of our staff working at every point in time. So one of the key things that we did actually was to ensure that we could keep as many as possible earning 100% and some at home earning 50%. But we ensured that, you know, at every point in time, we're able to engage all of our employees and make sure that, you know, people were actually earning during the time. And that was really critical to us. However, we've recently gone through a restructuring exercise. And what is most important is ensuring that the staff that are staying behind, that have stayed behind, are re-engaged, are re-energized, and, you know, have a sense of fulfillment and the confidence that is required to ensure that they continue to give their best, understanding that we're in the service industry. So work has changed. It's not business as usual, but more important, it's really understanding that our customers are king, and that understanding that as long as we're able to provide and meet the needs of the customers, then we in ourselves actually achieve fulfillment in servicing those customers. So like I mentioned earlier on, you know, employees are very critical. Ensuring that employee engagement, you know, right from the bottom up and top down as well, is really, really critical. And then customers, ensuring that you understand what they want at every point in time and giving superior customer experience at every point in time, every touch point, you know, right for us from once they come into check-in, the experience is important, you know, right at the front desk and into every outlet that they actually go into. The experience that we deliver at every point in time is really critical to us. And the feedback, we ensure that very quickly we're able to you know, address the issues that are raised. And one of the things that we ensure that our employees also understand is that, you know, there's actually nothing wrong in making mistakes. It is when those mistakes are made repeatedly that it becomes an issue. So we give them the confidence to actually explore themselves and to express themselves and to deliver for the business. And I think those are real critical factors for us that ensure that we can actually move from fragility to agility. That is very, very important going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Aminu, let me talk a little bit about the real estate sector. So during COVID, you found a lot of commercial property not being underutilized. Going forward, on both the residential and commercial property side, I believe that in the next year or so, organizations are going to rethink how they use their commercial property, office space, hotels, and so on. If you're looking within the private sector, what would you advise real estate companies start to think about positioning themselves in the market for growth, given that how their customers engage from a real estate perspective is going to change? Then also on the residential side, where are the pockets of opportunity to grow residential real estate in Nigeria? And what should private sector players in this space be thinking about?
Thanks very much. You know, Mr. Cherke touched on it, which is to say that commercial space is going to be a real challenge going forward. I think that, I'm sorry, am I visible at all? Something happened on my end.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you good.
Because, so you have a lot of the multinationals, for instance, where they're doing, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off in terms of how they operate. I think, though, for Africa and for Nigeria, certainly, there will always be this need. I don't know if it's a tradition thing of having a HQ, whether it's in Lagos or whether it's in Abuja. I think what we might find is going to be a challenge of this kind of large-scale opening up of offices kind of in different geopolitical zones across Nigeria. I think that might be the bigger issue. I think also you're going to have between suppliers of commercial spaces, you're going to have that negotiation process happening. And I think that's completely understandable. Again, this occurred in 2016. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is something negative. It's almost a readjustment of the market. And I touch back on 2016 to say this has been experienced in a certain way, where a lot of commercial units you find are termed with dollar rates. So for the first time we had, because again, Naira crashed at that time, the first time round rather, so you then had these adjustments in terms of what contracts look like and what even the currency looked like for contracts and so on and so forth. I do think real estate continues to be a real viable option for investment, both for the private sector and also public sector, but that's a longer term issue of if you can get public institutions to invest long term. What we saw in the Western world is because there was this issue of working from home, being stay safe, protect yourself, protect the community, and so on and so forth, there was actually a huge jump, a huge interest in individuals really trying to create their own personal private spaces. You're working from home, you might set up a small study office within the house or do a little shed outside so that the kids don't come and knock on your door and so on and so forth. And we've experienced that personally as a company, interestingly enough. And again, I don't know whether this is unique to Urban Shelter or this is across the industry. The figures are telling us no, but certainly for Urban Shelter, again, we've had a huge surge in interest across. Our products are beginning from about 1.5 million all the way to about 350. And across the board, in particular on what I term the affordable housing end, there's been a huge surge in interest. Now, what's a bit upsetting is you then cannot match that demand with something that's effective. So this lends kind of Mr. Chuoke's idea of, well, creating mortgages, an intervention fund from CBN to be able to have financial tools for individuals that can then access the market. But there's this unfortunate, I think, perception about real estate being a rich woman's game, as it were. So, we've had in the past interventions in agriculture, in water, manufacturing, youth, but there's never that intervention, I think, in real estate. I will commend, I think, the government, because part of the Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan now that's been the reaction, kind of this short-term plug stimulus towards addressing COVID issues or the impact of COVID, housing has been termed, or real estate and construction has been termed as, a high growth sector. And there's a certain amount of funding kind of being targeted towards that. Now, this was announced as far back as June, July. I'm yet to see how this is being handled. And in that case, this multiplier effect that we expect to come through from the value chain that's associated with real estate and with construction. But going back to your question about investment and private sector, I think this is a very good opportunity, actually. Again, this might not be the year 2020. So what you're doing for 2020 is pivoting, it's planning, is considering diversification possible? Is it a national plan or contribution you want to do? Do you want to kind of, as a real estate company, look at providing shelter in terms of healthcare, that kind of angle? Or do you want to look at the bottom of the pyramid and say, okay, we're going to address social housing and approach certain states to take up long-term leasing so they can provide, shelters and hostels to youth, to women, to those vulnerable members of society? Do we want to look at tools? One of the tools that we provided as a company is, instead of looking at these 2-year plans provided in terms of, come and pay your house within a 2-month period, we looked at an actual 5-year payment plan that we would then switch on and get mortgage companies, which we have signed up to 2 mortgage companies, and even get Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company. We've also signed along with them to remortgage this and provide a much longer mortgage plan for individuals. So I think we've had to look at those unique strategies depending on, again, what is being faced and say, would this work for us? There's also, I think, no fear in honestly waiting and watching. There is really no fear, so long as you're able to cover some of your costs. One of the things I really want to thank the Urban Shelter staff is we had always been working almost 2-3 jobs each. So towards December, January, we were about to push for a really big expansion plan in terms of capacity, staffing, recruitment. We, of course, had to pause that. But what it did mean is, because of February and March and then that subsequent close down, we actually did not have to kind of let anybody go. Instead, we work behind the scenes. Even though Mr. Chirke feels there isn't much technology going on in real estate. So we work.
I actually wanted to take you up on that, the comments you made.
You want to pose the question and then I try and do a rebuttal.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to pivot to that question very quickly before we go to Q&A. But Mr. Chioke made a comment around, real estate companies, construction companies do not have computers. Some of them don't have computers. I mean, with a shortage of skilled labor and restrictions of cross-border movements, surely there is a need to make significant investment in technology or digitization of innovative building systems. Where is the construction industry and real estate industry in Nigeria? Are they thinking ahead? Because really, to move forward and to grow, these are some of the areas that, Nigerian companies should be thinking about investing in. So what are your thoughts?
How much time do we have? So the thing
2 minutes, I hear. So, yeah.
Everybody keeps up. So the interesting thing is there's a huge drive now about, a few years back we had the fintech. Now the buzzword 2019, 2020 has been PropTech, property technology, and how that impacts us. Now, there are two sides of this. We would love to see technology, innovation, digitalization, especially when it comes to geomapping. Interestingly, only about 5, 6, 7% of Nigeria's entire landmass is actually digitally available for you to look at. How do you plan when you don't know what you have, especially when it comes to urban planning, administration, and development? So it becomes a huge challenge. So I think there's a huge opportunity in that when it comes to land registry, when it comes to geomapping, when it comes to accessing plotting, when it comes to transfer of titles. And that immediately has an impact on time frame, efficiency, effectiveness, costing as well, because these are taking less time and it's not taking much money. It's something that's just digitalized. You can print up, log on a plot and everything comes up for you. I think I'm wary on the construction side when it comes to, you can, print a house in 2 days. Not because I don't like the technology. As a company, we have a unit under the building services that specifically handles research and development. And one of the things we do is keep up with these kind of innovations. For instance, Peru, they've concentrated a lot about being able to print a house. Now, I like it. I think it's interesting. The reason I don't necessarily think it's right for Nigeria at this time is because the Director General, I think, for NBS has told us there are 27% of us that are unemployed. We have huge unemployment. We have a huge labor force. I think that it'll be far nicer, and it'll be it would be more effective to get more people building. So that reduces the unemployment rate, to get youths engaged. Typically now, it might sound like chaotic, but typically you might need anything from 10 to 15 people to build a 2-bedroom bungalow in Nigeria. Imagine 10 to 15 people on one bungalow, building 1,000, building 100,000. Imagine what that would mean for employment. Imagine that, and that's just direct labor. You then don't even go through all the other skilled professionals that we might be talking about. So I think rather than kind of building a house in 2 days, you end up with 1 million houses without the CBN intervention, giving mortgages. You would actually just 1 million printed homes just gathering dust. So there's a case for it. I think it's just what we want to prioritize as a nation. For us as a company, what we prioritize as well, skilled labor, but not just skilled labor. And I will just again slightly diverge. When we're constantly pushing children to go to university, not everybody needs to go to university. What we're looking for as a company is a master plumber. I'm looking for electrician. We're looking for carpentry work. We're looking for masonry work, tiling, plastering, painting. These are skills, core skills that goes towards you building up a career and expertise in that do not require you to go through a 5-year education system that might end up being 7 because of closures in university and so on and so forth. So there is a role I think the PropTech can take. Absolutely. It would help in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity, especially when it comes to, I think, the land registry issues, titling issues, transfer issues, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I'm being told I only have 10 minutes and I've got a whole bunch of questions here that I need to ask. So, Mr. Phillips, let me go straight to you. I recall during the pandemic, I had a conversation with the founder of Nando's. And I think the question I'm going to ask, he indicated how important this is, especially in a crisis. So the question is from Rekia Bello Aliu. She's asking, she would like to ask the panelists if they have found that the pandemic has forced them to be innovative and creative in a way that they did not know they could, as well as being more customer-centric and bringing humanity more into relating and communicating with employees and customers and stakeholders? And what have you seen has been an effect on you, your organization, as well as external customers? So this is the human side of doing business. How have you reflected on engaging with your customers, with stakeholders, and your employees? What are the key takeaways for you?
I think certainly the environment that we've experienced now is one that has challenged the ability for us to work together socially, physically, and feel in touch. Because what we've had, certainly in our own experience, and most of the companies we deal with and advise, is that this remote working is something that's, it's when I say it's come to stay, it has for a lot of people who say that even when things ease up, they found it to be a much more efficient way of working. And therefore, the whole digital relationship kind of model is being developed, whereby you're saying, how can we stay in touch with each other regularly? How can we have meetings regularly? And in our own firm, where most of the people were really working from home, we have these sessions where groups come together just to see each other and literally feel each other and come together and have a sort of a gathering where they work together and carefully on that particular day, and they take it in turns. So I know that this remote working situation we find ourselves is something that is here to stay. But it has led on to the cancellation of the 9 to 5 working day. Because our consultants, for example, have complained is the mild word I would use to say that they're working literally 24 hours a day.
Absolutely.
Some are choosing the time that they want to work. Some have to work in line with when others are because they're sort of providing input into each other's work, and others just take their time. So the 9 to 5 working day is something that's sort of cancelled and it's changed. And as a result of that, also the technology to support this new way of working is itself being highlighted. And so you have different applications that allow people to contact each other, to deal with each other, and do all kinds of things. And talking about real estate, which Sadi, I do commend you on all the various things the organization is doing. But you find out that for me, real estate is moving more to residential, while I think for the work environment, it is being challenged, whereby organizations are saying, we really don't need as much space as we had in the past, and we really got to change things. I talked earlier on about the 9 to 5 working day disappearing, and it brings us the issue about work and life balance. How do we ensure that we're not burning out as a result of this? And a few people felt that at the beginning, but I think organizations are learning to deal with this and come up with ways and means in which people don't burn out, and people have accustomed themselves gradually to the way and manner in which they want to work. Organization structures are changing, reporting lines are changing, accessibility is, things are changing from that point of view. And I think a lot of people are paying attention to it. I remember one, it's a bit of a challenge. We had to have a meeting, and one of our staff had to hold the meeting in a car because the home just wasn't appropriate for that function. And the car was the only place where they could find peace and quiet. So workforce automation is going to be happening a lot. And I think organizations just have to be very, very conscious of the fact that let's keep communicating with staff. Those that have had to cut costs and reduce the compensation to staff, they've got to think about what that means. Some argue that now you don't have to come to work every day, so you don't have to spend so much. You don't have that much hassle of allocating 2, 3, 4 hours a day to travel alone. Some are thinking of creating work centers whereby let's go to a location where you can work from, okay? It has the internet access, it has the social gathering, so to speak, okay? And I can have my lunch, have my coffee and so on, and yet be away from home, but not face the challenge of driving 2, 3 hours to my place of work every day. So people are finding different ways to deal with this whole new way of working. And therefore, reskilling is going to be very, very important, because we've got to reskill staff and see how we can get people to be tuned in. So digital transformation, we all talk a lot about that, and we got to look at how we can get our people to deal with these digital transformation requirements and about our processes and so on. Okay, let me keep quiet there because I know we're wrapping up and
we are wrapping up. Yes, thank you very much for that. I think I have time for one last question, and then I would allow all of you to make final comments. So, Mrs. Aminu, there's a question around the scale in a demand for real estate property. How are you bundling insurance into your product?
Sorry, I missed that. Could you said something about demand?
Yeah, so there's a question around in your industry during the pandemic period, there has been an increase in demand for real estate ownership. How has your organization been able to bundle insurance into your product? I think there must be an insurance person in the yes, who's looking at how to promote more insurance products. But it's a very good question, and it's an area that we need to cover.
So as a matter of standard, things like construction insurance is part of how we work. Things like project insurance is part of how we work as well. So that comes as a standard. When it comes to individual insurance, because you're transferring that property essentially, both in terms of ownership, in terms of land documents and so on and so forth, it then does obviously become the responsibility of the homeowner. But during construction phase, we take that up. So unfortunately, we are working with a lovely company. I won't divulge the name so that to give them a plug, but we do have construction insurance when it comes to our properties. I don't know if I should touch on Rakia's question really quickly. I think what this pandemic has done for most people is it has humbled us.
Yeah.
It has brought this real sense of humility and humbleness, things that we took for granted. Of course, the big things such as health, but even the little things, the right to simply move out. Mr. Choke mentioned he would have traveled perhaps 10 times in a 10-month period. So these things that we took for granted suddenly, I think, became far, far more valuable for us. So just to touch on that, to say that it's both humility, so we don't take it for granted, how we interact with colleagues, with clients, with even family. And that's really, I think, transformed us. What will be interesting to see is we are, as human beings, short-termist. It'll be interesting to see whether this kind of feeling continues on in the next years to come.
Thank you. So let me start with Mrs. Dupe. Your final words on this discussion. What are some of the key takeaways? What would you like to share with the audience? Final words in 1 minute, please. No, we can't hear her. You're muted. You're muted, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was just saying, fragility must be embraced. In the midst of fragility, there are definitely opportunities. It is really, again, I'll go back to, to saying fierce, that you must remain flexible. You must remain, free or fair, open to take up opportunities. I would say there must be an intentionality to ensure you can, take advantage of those opportunities and to the change that is happening as well. I would say it's important to engage with your stakeholders, from guests to vendors to every stakeholder that you identify. I would say R is for resilient. It's important that, you remain realistic and you're resilient. C is collaboration and creativity. And E is for excellence execution, like I said. So it's important to build all of this into your business. Today it's COVID. Tomorrow it may be something else. And so it's important to have that fluidity and be able to very quickly adapt. When we build into our plans, we're not making, we're not being taken on our ways. It's important to have that plan and the business continuity. And SMEs, it is so much more important for them to put systems and processes in place to ensure that they can actually remain resilient and be able to adapt to the change that is required. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Ike, what are your final comments?
Yes, okay. We open with the word VUCA. We live in VUCA times, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But VUCA times do create opportunities. And when I think about the two sectors that we've talked, two of the sectors we've talked about this morning, I had initially tried to consider how real investors might look at them. But as we deliberated, I realized there's actually a huge financial opportunity for investors trying to preserve value, both in the hospitality sector as well as in the real estate sector. And look at it from this context. Nigeria has a population growth rate of about 3%, whereas we are in a recession. That means we are in a negative growth position. So every year, the population is getting more and more, but there's not enough food for all of us on the table. Nigeria, if you look at the monetary policy indices today, you see that inflation is about above 14%. The exchange rate is sort of two multiple bands going on, with the parallel market one level and the official at another. I won't go into that area. It's been well discussed already.
Yes,
so if you want to preserve value, real estate is actually one of the best places to just take money in Naira, instead of trying to go and fight and convert into dollars to preserve value. Buy real estate and buy a lot of it. You should be talking to Sadia, because when you do so, what will happen in about 2 or 3 years, we will reset again as normally happens. Yeah. And then it will then catch up. All those population will then be looking for places to live and, exist. So we actually, from a financing perspective, are looking quite keenly at the real estate sector. It's also quite clear that in the hospitality sector, we haven't done anything at all for domestic tourism. And there could be a lot more that can go in there. If you then go into the FMCG space, we need food. Every morning, we need to find a way to eat and survive and get through these difficult times. And as Felicia had highlighted, storage is important. Being able to process some of the food into additional products is very helpful. It creates more opportunities down the value chain. But I think we all have to sort of remain nimble as we look at these difficult times, and you can then see, you can eke out, opportunities of excellence out of them that can let the company grow to a new level to survive these challenging times that we're faced with. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Aminu, your final words. Obviously, IK has positioned the real estate industry very well, and I have to chat to you online to see where the investment opportunities are for myself, but it'd be great to hear your final words.
Yeah, I think whatever we're paying you, Mr. Cherokee, I'm going to double it. Thank you so much. Nothing being paid. Sorry, I apologize. Madam Dupe, thank you so much. I love that word, and I'm going to start using it if you don't mind. So fragility to agility. I think, we have to just have this culture of building business excellence. I heard another term from my wonderful mentor, Tony Sainian. She uses the term pandemic-proofing your business. Not that I think you can ever kind of foolproof your business for a pandemic, but I think the objective is to kind of minimize those shocks, even without a COVID shocks coming in economy. It's just the cyclical way that, booms and busts of a microeconomy works, of how a country operates. So it's so important to build that business excellence, I think, in terms of the leadership of businesses, in terms of the core processes and functions, in our case, things like projects, really putting focus to that, and also pivoting, diversifying, and I think positioning better for what is to come, so that you're waiting it out, as it were, to see how do you then come out of this much better and trying to identify what those opportunities are that may come across. So you're minimizing that shock, but repositioning towards a post-pandemic or a post-shock period where you then emerge much, much stronger. And a quick minute to just thank NES for, despite a challenging year and postponing, still being able to come through. Organizers have been absolutely fantastic. Thanks to frontline staff as well, just generally Nigeria and across the world, and healthcare workers and urban shelter team. Again, thank you so much for the support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Phillips, final words. And I think from you, what I'd like to hear is, how do we ensure that organizations do not go back to business as usual, but rather use this opportunity to transform their businesses? I've heard conversations around customer experience. I've heard collaboration. I've heard resilience. I've heard digitization. It's very easy for us to wish the COVID crisis away and go back to business as usual. Final words on what organizations should continue to do in terms of pivoting their businesses.
Thanks a lot. And two responses I want to give. The first one, I want to quickly slip this in, and it's like talking from a height of 45,000 feet. It's about our economy generally. We've all discussed how we can operate at a micro level, but all these things will not happen unless we have massive investment coming into the system. We really need it. We all know. I can tell you that there's no business, no activity in this country that anybody can get into and you will fail. It's just not, because there's just so much demand for everything. Well, what we lack is the financial investment and the technical investment and technical competence that will make it happen. So I believe that more and more, we need to look at a more deregulated economy whereby more investment can come in. The government has got to make it easy for investors to come in and put money in. It was said yesterday that we would need about $100 billion a year for several years to meet our infrastructure master plan. And yet we're only generating less than $70 billion. So how are we going to do it? It's got to be from external investment. And if the environment and the government is not creating a very comfortable, workable, transparent and enticing environment to come and make investments, it won't happen. So I'm just saying that, look, for a start, we must, whatever we do, whatever level we're operating at, the lower level, whether it is housing, fast food, hospitality, aviation, whatever it is, for it to happen, we're going to need some serious investors to come in and help to jumpstart and take advantage of this huge population that we say we have. And also, we need to help ourselves. 50% of local products, or there should be local sourcing strategy, whereby more and more we use our own products. And I think the government needs to show leadership in that area. Going forward, I think, again, we talk about digital transformation. We need to transform our people, okay? People really need to be tuned in to the new world that we face. And I think it's happening because for the private sector, if you don't, you will fail, you will go bankrupt, you will be liquidated. So we really cannot negotiate that. Improving processes. I loved a lot of stuff that Duque said about having our processes, about being customer sensitive, appreciating what customer needs, and trying to ensure that both our customers and our people and our processes are in tune with today's modern ways. Having said that, don't forget, we need a strong digital infrastructure. We need the bandwidth to make all these things happen so that we can leapfrog and do really wonderful things as far as these things are going on. Yes, to define the skills that we need. So let's get the investors in. Let's get government supporting everybody and let everybody try and work in the best way possible. There are systems and processes that exist. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just got to get on with it and be very serious about it. That's me done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all my panelists for participating in this discussion, from fragility to agility. And I'm sure all the participants have enjoyed the session. Thank you very much for NESG for setting up this session. And we look forward to joining you on the other sessions. Thank you.